Have to twist your arm to do X2, or were you on board right from the start?
No, I was on board. Yeah, because X2 was a chance to do a lot of the things we could not afford to do on X1. The budget was very tight on X1, and my release schedule got moved up 6 months, which when you're a young, stupid filmmaker, you think, oh, I guess that doesn't mean anything, and then I'd never made a studio film. I had very unpleasant moments on that movie, freaking out, thinking it was all over, career-wise. But yeah, we made, I think, just enough money to justify the sequel. And in X2, a lot more freedom, some more money, some more time. I could do that Nightcrawler sequence that I wanted to do that in X1.
When you first started working with him, Sir Ian McKellen once said you were afraid of actors.
No, I think I'm intimidated by actors. Ethan Hawke, when we were working together as a kid, said something very profound to me I'll never forget. He said, good actors equal production value. Meaning, you can blow up a whole city or a plane, crash it, you can do any of that stuff, but a great act, but nothing beats Jack Nicholson staring at you in The Shining, saying lines, and that's what Ethan meant by that. I never forgot that. Whenever I see actors do what they do, they really intimidate me. And yet when I'm on set, because it's my set and my movie, I have no problem somehow telling them what to do. In fact, Ian McKellen once, he said, can you give me, Bryan, could you possibly give me any other direction besides less theatrical? But every actor's different. Usual Suspects was a great training ground because every actor came from a different discipline. And X-Men is very similar. There's a lot of theater actors, but there are a lot of TV actors and some movie actors. Or working with Tom Cruise is a really different experience because Tom is a movie star, and then the actors I surrounded him with in Valkyrie are all, Royal Shakespeare Academy guys. So.
Your Superman Returns carried out some of the themes of the X-Men films in regards to the reluctant superhero. And the film also has the humor and the romance of the Richard Donner Superman films, especially the first and second film, which are elements totally missing from Man of Steel. Can you comment about that?
Well, they're very different films. I mean, Superman Returns is very much a love song to the Richard Donner film. It's a sequel to what Richard Donner did, many years ago. So it has the tonality and echoes that, from the casting of the guy who looks a lot like Chris Reeve, Bryan Ralph, to the music. A movie like Man of Steel is very different. That's a sort of a reboot of the entire universe, a reconception of it. So naturally it would be, totally different, visually different, and but very impressive.
I think it would try to get, some charm in there,
I think Henry Cavill's pretty charming.
At one point you're going to direct a sequel to Superman Returns, and of course the project wound up getting scuttled.
Yeah.
What would your sequel have?
Probably something similar to that, to Man of Steel, from something like that, something with his odd character. It would have probably gone in that direction, some alien threat and some super villain as opposed to Lex Luthor, who's a human villain. It probably would have definitely head in that direction. But I had a lot of trouble cracking the story, and I don't know how much excitement there was to continue with that at the studio level. And then I went and made Valkyrie, and that was that.
Speaking of Valkyrie, was there ever any studio resistance to casting Tom Cruise, even though he's a box office star? You don't think Tom Cruise, Nazi, German?
I know, it's weird. Well, he looks. I wouldn't have thought that either. When I first went to United Artists and Tom Cruise, who's running it, it was meant to be a small project, but we kept looking at the photographs of Stauffenberg, and he looks exactly like Tom, and he's the same energy, and he's a similar kind of character that I know Tom can play really well. But I really left it up to Tom. I put it on the table and I said, look at the book, look at the picture, what do you think? I mean, would you want to do this yourself? And he thought about it and agreed to do it. It wasn't a big process, he just needed to figure it out. And I'm happy because it made it a film. I mean, you make a film about a plot that no one knows about to kill Hitler that failed. And it makes like a couple $100 million. That's pretty amazing, and then you can't really do that without. Well, you can, I guess, but it's harder without Tom Cruise. And he's wonderful to work with. He's incredible incredible to work with. It's an experience, very like nothing else. Like with, and I also had never worked with a movie star before. I've worked with people who become movie stars, but I have never actually worked with a movie star. Probably the most famous actor I ever worked with at that time when I started working with them was Patrick Stewart, and that was from Star Trek and television and a movie. So this was jumping right into a massive movie star who is also the owner of the studio, which is weird. But he was great. He didn't pretend. He just he's very deferential to directors. He loves directors. He loves to be directed.
Have you ever been offered one of the Trek movies or had any interest in directing a Star Trek film?
Yeah, would have been interested at some point, but I've never been approached or met with Paramount about them that I can remember. No, I don't think so. It's tough. It's scary. I think I'm a bigger fan of Star Trek than JJ, and I think that's what makes JJ a better filmmaker for Star Trek than I would be. I wonder, because I might be such a big fan, I'll screw it up and be too precious. I don't know, but it's just so cool.
Well, you actually had a big part in one of the...
Yeah, I was in Star Trek 10. I'm 19 frames, don't blink. But I have a trading card, so it's pretty cool.
One of the biggest hits we ever had here at Fantasia was Michael Dougherty's Trick or Treat.
Oh yeah, I'm very proud of that.
Woo!
That's cool. Produced across your production companies, Harry. I was wondering, have you ever had any interest in directing a conventional horror film?
Yes, very much. Yeah, if I ever get a break in between the big movies or television pilots, which I also like to do, I would, if I can find the right piece of material, something with a bit of supernatural in it, I would love to direct a very suspenseful horror film. They're my favorite films are not so much the slasher, but like movies that just, like, I don't know, well, The Alien's probably more expensive, that example, but The Exorcist or Sixth Sense, well, it's not horror, but anyway, you know what I mean.
Your last film, Jack the Giant Slayer, seems to have been creatively compromised. It seemed like you were seeking to make a more adult fairy tale movie, and it seemed like the studio might have been pushing it more towards kids. Was there...
Not really. I think tonally going into that movie, I knew the tone I was making, something between, an adventure, something between Ray Harryhausen with a touch of Princess Bride. So totally, I was fine with it. The studio I think the studio didn't particularly do a great job distributing it, which I normally wouldn't complain about, but in this particular case, I have specific reasons why I feel that. But the intention was to sort of homage those kinds of films that I grew up with when I was very young. So, and I never, I wanted to work with fully rendered CG characters, size, and all that. And Nick was great to work with too, Nick Holt.
And you also worked with 3D for the first time. What was
Yeah.
that experience like?
It was interesting. It does change your shooting style, and I found myself directing in 3D, so I'd have the glasses on, the two big monitors in front of me, and the only thing it affected was I didn't really give myself enough coverage. I wasn't shooting as much as I would normally. So I learned what shots work in 3D and what shots don't work as well. And now with X-Men Days of Future Past, I am shooting native 3D, I'm shooting in stereo, but on the set I only have my 2D monitors, my small normal 2D monitors that I always used to use. And I'm finding I'm just shooting more aggressively like that.
Well, let's talk a little about Days of Future Past. How faithful is the movie to the John Byrne, Chris Claremont comics from the 80s?
I still would have to say it's inspired by it. Obviously in that story, Kitty Pryde, the Traveler, here, Wolverine. But it is the essence of it. It's the story of something's wrong in the future and how can we change it. And there are characters, they're familiar characters, some that made it in this movie but didn't make it in the comic, and some the opposite, and then some new ones that we added. I mean, that book centers around a singular conflict battle. We've expanded it takes place all over the world, and it's got a lot of different stuff going on in it. But it's very inspired and very much in keeping with the essence of that story. It's not the brightest, most happiest X-Men movie, but it has a bright intention, and it's about trying to right wrongs and change and getting a second chance.
Time travel has always been a staple of science fiction. What are some of the pitfalls of working with a time travel subject?
Well, it was tough to crack. It took me a little while to figure out what my rules of time travel are. And, there are movies that, especially a movie like Back to the Future, it really all takes place in the past. And your one grounding element is this photograph that keeps fading. So it's trying to find a device like that for a movie that has things happening in the past simultaneously with what's happening in the future. So I won't get into the specifics of it, but I sort of came up with a formula of how it would work, and then I adhere to it. I stay true to it. So I pitched it to James Cameron. He thought it was a good idea. It worked. So.
Will the movie have some of the elements of the comics that were much loved, like the Sentinels?
Yeah, some robots and some. And which is fun about this X-Men movie. It's different than the other ones in the sense that it does deal with something unique, time travel, which is there's precedent for in the comic, obviously with Days of Future Past and other storylines. And then there's technology, the idea of technology, which hasn't been explored yet.
Will we see the mutant internment camps and some of the anti-mutant hysteria in the comics?
You'll see a little of that. You'll see, but it takes place in the future, about give or take 10 years after X-Men 3 or Wolverine, and then it also takes place about exactly 10 years after X-Men First Class. But most of the movie takes place in 1973. A lot of collars, big collars, flared pants, horrible colors.
Yeah, it seems like we raided a lot of vintage shops here in Montreal.
Oh my God! You got to come to our costume department. We have enough. It's like the weirdest thrift store. But it's real memories for me because I was a kid in that period and I forgot how ridiculous my father must have looked. Peter Dinklage looks like a smaller version of my father. He was very handsome at the time.
Was it a challenge juggling all the mutants in this film and all the actors' schedules?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot. Some of the actors are run of picture, but then you have other actors like like Anna Paquin, who's on a series. Peter Dinklage, she's on True Blood. He's on Game of Thrones. Evan Peters is on American Horror Story. You have other Jennifer Lawrence is in Hunger Games. So you try. So it's been interesting shooting the movie with this kind of cast. But what's important, I believe, is they're not all thrown in there just to get a bunch of faces in there. They really all serve the story in a really, I think, a very beautiful way. And it's been worth it, but it's been tough. Like there was one certain scheduling stuff we had to deal with at the beginning of the shoot where we were shooting from 6 a.m. to 3 a.m. in the morning, and then going back again. And then now we're doing the same thing up against a clock. I have to finish in a couple of weeks, just because But I'll be done. I'm doing well on schedule.
After sitting out the last two X-Men movies, does it feel good to be back in this universe?
Well, I produced X-Men First Class, and I wrote the story for it. So I was there through the casting process and the design, and I was on set a bit, and then I was there in the post process to give my thoughts and things. So I kind of eased back into it with that. But to be there as a director, it's just great. I mean, the actors are old friends of mine, and the new cast I'm familiar with and friendly with. Nick Holt I just made a movie with, Jennifer Lawrence, and I know through him because they were in a relationship. But the new guys I knew personally, but I hadn't really worked with, or that I didn't spend a lot of time with, were James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender, and they're just fantastic. It's just a very cool experience. And you were on set, he came on set. It was cool.
This day of my life.
In the Wolverine, we were sitting there chatting.
Some of the themes from the first two X-Men films still relevant in this film? Stuff is social acceptance, or has that been played out now onto something else?
No, they're very much, because this film is very much the story of where X-Men First Class was the story of Xavier and Magneto and the beginning of their relationship. This movie is about them becoming who they have become or will become. And that's kind of interesting to see. You find the characters in very different places than you left them.